Now that Severance Season 2 is done, everyone is aggressively trying to cope until Season 3.
Let's throw a tin of candies.
So in the meantime, let's dive into all of the Easter eggs, references, and hidden details you may have missed in Season 2. Any Jared B back one more time to talk about Severance Season 2. Because after rewatching Season 2, there is a lot to cover, so grab some snacks from the egg bar and let's get refining. As Mark returns to work, he's greeted with an entirely new MDR team from a supposedly closed-down Branch 5X. Whatever and wherever this ominous branch is, they must have had a different perk catalog, as we can see that Gwen has a profile silhouette picture hanging on her desk, mirroring that of the big ol' Keir Egan profile first seen in Season 1. Dario mentions that his old branch had ropes as elevators, alluding to his old branch definitely being underfunded, as he has a similar desk tchotchke as Mark S. However, his is made of wood with the name Grimaldi on it, referencing a small town in southern Italy. Quick reminder, Mark Scout's has the name Allentown on it, which is actually a nod to Ben Stiller's wife, Christine Taylor's hometown of Allentown, Pennsylvania. When talking with Milchick, he makes an excuse that Miss Cobell had to leave because of an erotic fixation on Mark's innie and outie, essentially wanting a throuple with the pair. Now, this idea is actually a theme that happens with each of our MDR workers. Mark is mixed up with Helly and Helena, Outie and Innie Dylan with Gretchen, and Innie and Outie Irving and Bert. The Keir Chronicle is completely fake and is packed full of details, while the photo of the group is a silly Photoshop of the group MDR photo plopped into a real 1960s ticker tag parade photo featuring President Dwight D. Eisenhower visiting Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Ironically, that same speech that Eisenhower gave in Brazil, he addressed the workers and their goal of freedom for themselves and future generations, seeing how this ties with themes of Severance. There's an article about the Bard Creek Bandit, which is potentially a subtle nod to Cobell going into Mark's home back in Season 1, but rather I think it's actually a cover-up for upper management, all of them of Lumen, sneaking into homes while severed workers are at work, as we saw this with Drummond and Bert later on. Rickon's The UUR gets a call out as his book found its way to the severed floor in Season 1, and Lumen later contacts him about spewing more Severance propaganda to the severed employees. Mark W. mentions that he didn't like the color of the carpet in their old branch, saying that it was puce.
They were purple.
No, they were puce, I know, because it makes me nauseous.
A very specific muted purplish color that Gwen subconsciously wears the next day to work. The Lumen is listening video oddly foreshadows some events later in the season, like Mark and Helly falling in love, Irving going on a scary vision quest, and Helly being drowned disguised as the fun bobbing for pineapples game. The voice of the Lumen building in the video happens to be Keanu Reeves. And the water tower is my favorite current SNL cast member, Sarah Sherman. The fiery Irving's dancing about is actually a nod to the Heat Miser from 1974's The Year Without Santa Claus, confirmed by Ben Stiller via the official Severance podcast.
We did a little moment with Irving that's kind of a nod to the Heat Miser song in there.
When he says, let's burn this place to the ground.
Let's burn this place to the ground. There's like these little Irvings with their hair on fire.
Further in the video, it's mentioned that Lumen is operating in 206 countries worldwide. However, in the current state of the world, there are only 195 countries, providing more evidence that anything and everything on the severed floor is probably a lie. There's motivational posters all throughout the new break room, with one stating, "Hang in there," of Dylan holding open the OTC from the end of Season 1. This is also a religious allusion, with Dylan appearing to be Jesus nailed to a cross, giving himself up for the other 3 MDR members to experience the outside world. In Milchick's drawer, there appears to be bonsai trimming tools and paste. We later see that he has a bonsai tree in the corner of his office, as bonsai care and shaping includes pruning branches in order for them to, grow healthily. Similar to what Lumen believes the severance procedure is all about, and ties to the quote in Cobell's home in Season 1 that Milchick repeats.
We must be cut to heal.
Miss Wong's little bubbler game is one of the last bits of childish folly she has left, however is missing yellow hoops referencing frolic or joy, as this game, like I said, is her only escape back to her childhood wonder. Later in the episode, we catch a glimpse of Helly's file names that she's working on, Firstly being Sunset Park, a file mentioned by PD in Season 1, Sienna, the very first file Helly completed, and now she's working on a file called Santa Mira, a fictionalized town in the 1956 movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, being our very first clue that this Helly isn't actually Helly, but rather Helena undercover. Further evidence to this episode of Undercover Boss is Helena fumbling to find the computer's on switch, showing that, yeah, this ain't Helly. The other day, I wasted hours canceling like 5 different subscriptions, streaming my gym membership, weeklygoatpicks.org. Thankfully, today's sponsor, Rocket Money, was there to help. Rocket Money is the all-in-one personal finance app that will help you cancel subscriptions, lower your bills, and manage your money better. Audi JBuck has no sense of savings. Luckily, Rocket Money can help its customers save up to $740 a year when you use all of the app's premium functions. Rocket Money will automatically scan your bills to find savings. This means that just in a couple of taps, Rocket Money can help negotiate your bills for you, getting you the best possible rate, meaning more cash in your pocket, meaning more waffle parties for you to enjoy. Rocket Money can even create a customized budget in seconds, identifying top spending categories to help you stay within those budgets. Head over to rocketmoney.com/JBuck or click the link in the description to get started for free and save even more with Rocket Money. Thank you, Rocket Money, for sponsoring this portion of the video. Now back to the severed floor. Once Mark switches back to his Audi, he and Dylan have a codename of Persephone between the pair, as Persephone is the Greek goddess of spring who was cursed to spend half of her time in the underworld, aka the severed floor, and the other half on Mount Olympus, the Audi world, similar to, Mark's innie and Audi. As Milchick's off to fire Dylan and Irving, his license plate has the Cure slogan of Remedium Homnibus, in Latin meaning a cure for mankind or a remedy for man, as Keir believes that severance is the way to cure the world of woe. Surprisingly, Milchick passes a billboard featuring a band called Dieter's Brother, meaning Keir, but we don't find out about Dieter Egan until episode 4. Dylan's cul-de-sac is purposely shaped like a Lumen raindrop, showing that Lumen's influence is everywhere in the town of Keir. This is also witnessed in Pip's Diner being named after Philip Pip Egan, the 6th Lumen CEO, while Lenora Lake, where Irving lives, is named after the 7th CEO, Lenora Egan. When Milchick arrives to Irving's place, Irving mentions that he's been at home all night just watching The Barber of Seville, an opera later turned into a film that also goes by the name The Useless Precaution, as that's exactly what Milchick is doing here. He fires all of the MDR only for them to return to work days later. Mark's beta fish are red and blue, symbolizing our innies and outies, while male beta fish, notorious for fighting to the death unless a barrier is put up between the two, also foreshadows innie and outie Mark's head-to-head struggle later in episode 10. When talking with Mark, Devin, and Rickon, Milchick mentions that the OTC occurrence happened for roughly 39 minutes. Great attention to detail, as season 1's finale, when the OTC occurs, was the same runtime. This timing attention to detail is again hit on in real time at the end of this episode when the 4 MDR members return to work and get ready and go down on the elevator to the severed floor, lining up perfectly with the episode 1's return of them all on the severed floor. As a weirdo who's all about small details, this blew my mind. Dylan's job interview adventure at Great Doors is a fun behind-the-scenes nod to the origins of Severance, as creator Dan Erickson was actually working at a door factory, not thrilled with his job, and this is where the idea of Severance blossomed.
As I was writing the initial pilot, I was literally working a series of office jobs. I had just gotten to LA and sort of found on Craigslist like the first office job that I could find, which was at this door factory, just a factory that makes and repairs and ships doors and gates throughout the greater Los Angeles area. And so I was in this kind of small windowless.
Sorry, I mean party time, right?
It was.
That sounds wild. So then you're at the door factory, and is that where you first put pen to paper and started thinking about Severance?
Yeah. I was walking into work one day. It was 9 a.m. and I literally just had the thought, God, what if I could jump ahead and suddenly it would be 5, and I would have done the day's work, but I wouldn't have to experience it. I could just cut out that 8 hours.
Right. Can I just ask really quick, what is it exactly you did? Just so we know how mundane and shitty it was.
It was a lot of
Sorry.
it was literally like cataloging different hinges because they had this big inventory of different door parts, like hinges and knobs, but it wasn't all super organized. And they were like, we need somebody to come in and just make sure that we have like an ironclad log of what all we have.
And didn't you have like a basement office or?
It was in the basement, so there was no windows. And so I think that's where a lot of the kind of Lumen
basement themes come from?
Yeah.
That actually sounds great.
When you open a door now, do you like think about, oh, this is like a Jackson 238 now?
Yeah. Like honestly, a little bit. I mean, I've forgotten most of my door knowledge by now, but there was a while where I knew all the terminology for everything.
Right.
Just from the vibration I feel opening it, I'm like, oh, that's an X19 Omega.
It's also funny that the door guy is pissed off about Lumen doing their own in-house doors, while later it all kind of makes sense because all of the doors that exist down on Gemma's testing floor. Mark W. must have been at Petey's daughter's punk band performance because his anger towards Lumen when getting fired has a very similar cadence.
Fuck you, Lumen! Fuck you, Lumen!
As Helena makes her way down to the severed floor, she places her MDR badge around her neck, almost looking like that of a noose, because heading down there is essentially a death sentence, mirroring her Innie Helly's attempt back in Season 1 of ending her life. While further clues point to Helly not actually being on the severed floor, as the elevator chime plays for Mark, Dylan, and Irving, but not for Helena. Another clue that we've got a mole on the severed floor. Episode 3 starts with the Stone Roses Love Spreads, with the song's lyrics recounting the passion of the Christ, various moments in Jesus' life, however reinterpreting Jesus as a black woman, tying in with the whole new recanonized Keir paintings Milchick receives from Natalie. In the eyes of Lumen, Keir is the god above all. Mark and Helly make their way to the goats as they crawl through a tiny little tunnel like that of Alice in Wonderland or Being John Malkovich, leading to a whole new wonderful goat-filled land. While at Mammalian's Nutriball, Wyatt, the same guy from Season 1, talks about MDR having pouches and weird larvae living in them. Apparently a widespread rumor on the severed floor, as Bert mentions this same pouch rumor back in Season 1.
Like they say, you all have pouches.
Pouches? Like to carry young?
Yes.
Another sly clue to tell Helly is actually an undercover Helena is when Mark and her are asked to show their belly buttons to the goat people. Mark's belly button is visible, showing an innie as that is what he is. However, Helly's is not seen, alluding to her not being her innie. When Dylan meets Gretchen in the renovated security room, a tiny little statue of Keir Egan is on one of the shelves, striking the same pose as the bigger one back in Season 1, where Mark first confronts the Whole Mind Collective when they're handing out flyers. Gretchen's outfit surprisingly references Pam's outfit from The Office Season 3, Episode 17, encompassing similar themes from that episode. Two people who are familiar with one another are meeting in a different environment outside of work. Essentially, they are different people, and Michael praises Pam's artwork, impressed by it, like Gretchen is impressed by this version of Dylan. Later, Outie Dylan is reading a magazine called Midlife Driver, alluding to there being a driver, or rather a wedge between him and Gretchen, which ends up being his innie stealing some kisses. There's also a little Keir Egan doll on the floor. Dylan's kids are watching the 1980s, early 90s cartoon Danger Mouse, specifically Season 3, Episode 1, titled The Invasion of Colonel K. Ironically, several elements of this episode reference things in Severance, like Colonel K being described as an extraordinary man, much like Keir Egan, a spaceship entering his mind like a severance chip, and the gang having to navigate an endless series of tunnels like that of the severed floor hallways. There's several small things littering Devin and Rickon's home, like a goat head bust, it's always about the goats, A small statue of a man waking up on a table, like Mark and Helly on their first days at Lumen, and cubist form paintings, something Petey mentions in Season 1, which is an art form that distorts reality, much like reintegration. Through conversation, we learn Mark worked at Gaines College, as we can see a coffee mug briefly sporting the college's logo. The 4 colored wires attached to Mark's head when attempting to reintegrate mirror the 4 colors of the 4 different tempers that they're working on: woe, frolic, dread, and malice. As the ending song is The Who's Eminence Front, with its lyrics describing a party in which people hide from their problems behind a facade. In this case, Mark hides the hurt of Gemma's accident with the severance procedure. Episode 4, The Ortbo Adventure. Firstly, Ortbo is an anagram for robot, with robot originally deriving from the Czech noun robota, meaning forced labor, which, is like our severed employees. This episode was filmed over the course of 5 months at the Minnesota State Park Preserve in New York. The cast and crew actually had to jump onto snowmobiles daily to drive up to the mountains, and that's where they shot in the snow. It honestly sounds chaotic, but I love the attention to detail again. As Woe's Hollow, the world's tallest waterfall, is actually a Wastine Falls located on the park grounds. Adding to the wonder of this episode, the whole Irving dream sequence was actually done entirely practical. It was filmed in the early morning as the fog had naturally occurred, creating one of the creepiest and best scenes from this episode. The cliff Mark is standing on looks like that of the Keir Egan in the 100% file completion screen. This is also another clue that Helly is actually Helena, as Dylan, Mark, and Irving all say that they woke up on the ice down below, while Helly claims that she woke up on the cliff right where an Egan would be. The Ortbo video start screen features the Keir invites you to drink of his water painting, while also featuring an 8-bit version of the Keir hymn, originally sung by Cobell in Season 1.
Keir, brilliant one, Keir.
Later, this tune peeks through in the musical score when Cobell returns to Salt's Neck, and again is played by C and M in the Season 2 finale episode. Mark's shadow doppelganger is played by Adam Jepson, who actually portrays the mysterious man back in episode 1. However, I don't think that this is an actual character, just a stand-in for these 2 episodes. The Forbidden Fourth Appendix introduces Dieter Egan, which happens to be an anagram for AI generated, as it's heavily assumed that this was written by Rickon, with several details mirroring his own writing from the UUR audiobook. Big recommend if you haven't listened to it, by the way. I wouldn't be surprised if Lumen just fed ChatGTP Rickon's books and it spit out this 4th appendix, because further clues Rickon is the true author is Chapter 2 being titled The Thieving Nanny, referencing them thinking that Miss Selvig stole their baby in the Season 1 finale. When Irving is on his ghost computer, the file name is Montauk, a nod to the Montauk Project conspiracy about underground labs, weird experiments, and later sealing up stairwells and other doorways, along with the Montauk Monster, referencing the weird, gross seal creature that they found earlier in the episode. Montauk is also a reference to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, being where Clementine tells Joel to meet them after all is said and done. Both that movie and Severance deal with forgotten memories and purposely erasing parts of them. The initial screen Irving looks at is featuring a scattering of numbers. However, the numbers 8 and 9 are missing from this screen, symbolizing how only 7 of the 9 CEOs have more than likely been uploaded into some digital landscape, aka the board, with the current CEO, James Egan, being number 8 and Helena being number 9. Initially, only the numbers 1, 4, 5, and 7 are floating on Irving's computer screen, which can be translated to letters spelling out Egan. There's also a subtle sound effect coming from the bride's computer, noting that she has just completed her file 100%. The letters and numbers also make up a very brief visual of Helly's face, hinting to Irving that Helly is not Helly. And Milchick has to turn off the Glasgow block when Helena is in trouble, This was originally listed as a severance chip function in Season 1 and ties to the Glasgow Coma Scale. Used in coma patients, it's a system to score or measure how conscious a patient is, meaning that Helly was essentially put in a comatose state until this point. Dr. Maurer whistles Gordon Lightfoot's The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, a memorial to the sinking of the bulk carrier SS Edmund Fitzgerald in Lake Superior on November 10, 1975.
The Fitzgerald is one of the champions of the waters. She sets records for the heaviest load.
Nice. With its 29 crew members perishing with the ship. He picks up dental tools that later play into the testing floor with Gemma. Not only Gemma, but also points to the smile wall back in Season 1, Episode 3. A bit of dark thinking, but these were more than likely the previous test subjects on the testing floor that then expired and probably were buried next to the Lumen housing. In reality, the smile wall are the cast and crew from Season 1, as much of that season was filmed during the height of COVID lockdowns and was a fun way to see everyone's beautiful smiles as they otherwise were covered. On Mark's fridge, 2 pieces of Russian literature belonging to Gemma can briefly be seen, remembering Gemma was a Russian literature teacher, of which, we further explore this in Episode 7. A Wittgenstein duck-rabbit illusion sculpture sits behind Milchick in his office, this being a philosophy tool that begs the concept of aspect perception, raising questions about the nature of reality and perception and how someone views their own reality. Further Russian influences are used by Lumen when the MDR employees see that Irving has just been erased from their group photos. This was a tactic used by Stalin with his defectors, essentially erasing them from history and existence, for example, Nikolai Antipov. In a morbid visual, Lumen is ready for any employee to pass on the severed floor at any time, as bereavement mugs for each of our MDR employees can be seen, with a cute little touch of making the handle in the shape of a bee for bereavement. Irving's funeral starts with an 8-bit version of Frédéric Chopin's Piano Sonata funeral march, and the group taking 9 seconds of silence, referencing that of the 9 Lumen core principles. We know Irving worked in MDR for 3 years, as that's reflected in his quarters of service, but oddly these quarters point to Lumen starting business in the turn of the 1800s, roughly 40 years before Keir Egan was even born. I've seen some people claim that a work week is actually only 5 days versus 7, so you need to multiply and divide. And yes, the math does check out in this instance, but personally I chalk it up as just another Lumen lie. Dylan munches on Melon Irving's left ear, at face value alluding to the phrase, "lend me your ear." As we discover Irving's last "hang in there" is a clue for the testing elevator directions. But getting deeper, it's a nod to the painter Vincent van Gogh, famous oil painter of the mid to late 1800s, who famously cut off his own left ear. Irving's Audi dabbles in oil paintings as well. During Milchick's review, Drummond's hands oddly mirror that of Baphomet, a pagan deity alluding back to the goat man in Episode 3, as it means as above, so below, a perfect balance between justice and mercy. Helly and Mark have a bathroom reversal, as her threatening to come in mirrors that of Mark's mild threat in Season 1.
Hello? I'm gonna come in. I'm coming in.
Get ready, do the things you need to do, because I'm coming in.
No.
Okay, here I come.
Mark,
I'm sorry.
no, I'm not decent.
I'm sorry.
When Helly arrives back on the severed floor, the framing of her contrasted with Miss Wong resembles the 2 hemispheres of a person's brain, left being more analytical with Miss Wong's black and white clothing, as the right is more creativity-based with Helly's vibrant blues and red hair. Milchick not only metaphorically, but literally crosses the line in the elevator with Mark, a perfect visual cue that's also been used in 2019's Parasite. Mark mentions to Ragabi that the eggnog that she wanted was out of stock, it's out of season, giving us a clue that timeline-wise it may be the end of January, beginning of February, because Milchick just had his monthly review. And as Ragabi looks through Gemma's stuff, she pulls out this necklace to help Mark with his reintegration, as this is the same necklace Gemma can be seen wearing later in the Episode 7 flashbacks. Mark's reintegration flashes show severed-themed items like a split log beer, 2 containers holding dark and lighter objects, and beans, a nod to one of the new vending machine items, cut beans. Gretchen, having just stole some smoochies from Innie Dillon, now wears purple, showing that she is torn between the blue Innie world and the red Audi world. This same color is seen on Gemma at the end of this episode, right before Mark's seizure. Mark and Helly set up a little makeshift tent to get some privacy, something Innie Mark was informed his Audi was really good at in his wellness check back in season 1.
Your Audi can set up a tent in under 3 minutes.
Milchick's mirror scene is top-tier acting and was filmed in such a way that this back shot is a body double with Tramell Tillman appearing in a window where the mirror should be, similar to how they shot the head operation scene in Terminator 2. Bert's home gives off a much more colder, ominous feel when Irving shows up for dinner, contrasted with the warmer, comforting, inviting home that we saw in the season 1 finale, alluding to this whole dinner date actually having nefarious purposes. Bert and Fields talking about heaven and hell right before church, only for the preacher to then mention severance and that essentially saving your soul, feels like a Lumen is listening situation, and oddly mirrors Peggy's experience in the Lexington letter, having a similar event happen, with a Lumen radio ad playing as Peggy audibly says that she hates her job. Lumen is manipulating and targeting individuals. The Chinese restaurant scene is packed full of tasty details, firstly being filmed at Ang's restaurant in Kingston, New York, where much of Severance is shot, using this real location but changing the name to Zufu, which translates to grandfather, fitting in line with the other Kier businesses being named after former Egans, as this is what James referred to Kier as.
The grandfather would cherish what you've done.
There's also some really cool behind-the-scenes photos from the Chinese restaurant from Reddit user FixSticks Jr., showing some of the props used during filming, with another issue of the Kier Chronicle talking about Rickon's book, and mentions of the Ether lawsuits theoretically coming out of Salt's neck that we learn about later in episode 8. Mark is given 2 fortune cookies, mirroring his Innie and Audi, as only one is eaten. Ironically, while Helena strolls in and has a flirty little conversation with Audi Mark, the song subtly playing in the background is Kava Khan's Chinese Surfer, which happens to be the same song playing in season 1 during the egg bar, with the more relaxed setting where Innie Mark and Helly flirt.
Your father?
Sure, why not?
You want to take me home to Dad already?
Yeah, I think it's finally time.
Okay.
And when leaving the Chinese restaurant, only the FU is lit up, as it's a subtle nod to how Mark is feeling about what just happened with his confrontation with Helena in the restaurant. Episode 7 is all about Gemma, as Lumen's all up in her business, with their raindrop logo being featured on the blood drive equipment and later on the fertility clinic paperwork. More sinister Lumen meddling comes from the name of the fertility clinic being Bootseman, in German meaning boogeyman.
Afraid so.
Before this, Gemma's walking the Gaines campus as we get a similar overhead shot from season 1, this time filled with a warmer, more comforting feel than the dreary depression Mark is feeling in season 1. As Gemma's being tested by the nurse, she's given a weird little machine called a woe meter, theoretically measuring her sadness, as this is playing into the religious cult of Scientology and their own little meter called an E-meter. This little machine allegedly could register a user's emotional reactions after having the user hold on to these 2 little metal cans, whereas Lumen's version are plastic stones. Severance cinematographer and director of episode 7, Jessica Lee Ganya, mentioned that the past love storyline with Mark and Gemma is actually shot on film rather than digital, giving them a more nostalgic feel, showing them in this flashback, but also showing how there's love between these two. She also added that red in these scenes is where a bit of real love is, as we see Gemma tending to red flowers, wearing a red dress, dancing with Mark. Ironically, though, this same logic is then used in the very final shots of season 2, with Innie, Mark, and Helly featuring red lights, and then switching from digital to film, as this again symbolizes that the Innies have found real love despite their situation. Gayanya added some behind-the-scenes knowledge via the official Severance podcast that the really trippy transition from MDR following all of the wires down to the Watcher's room was shot entirely practical. No CGI, smoke, and mirrors here. When Mark visits Gemma, she sneezes twice, something that Mark confessed he loved about Gemma back in season 1.
Hey. Oh, bless you.
Excuse me.
And when she sneezed, she always sneezed twice.
Gemma is sent the same ideographic cards that Dylan steals back in season 1, episode 6, later learning that these are showcasing different psychological effects. The man fighting himself is ego death, or Chico Bardo, episode 7's title, while the man with the dog is Pavlov's dog, or classical conditioning. Ego death is then later symbolized by Gemma's yoga poses. As Gemma and Devin have a loving conversation about her being pregnant at their lunch date, the subtitles rather highlight Rickon and Mark's background conversation that has creator Dan Erickson written all over it.
Did you know that you can purify your urine?
Oh, fuck right off.
Water?
Why would I do that?
Experience the beauty and wonder of nature.
Why is it you want to do this?
Gemma mentions that she has a lecture on Haji Murad, another Tolstoy writing, which explores honor, betrayal, power struggles, featuring a beautiful thistle and an otherwise disheveled one, standing half broken, though it is still resilient. This is all symbolic of Gemma. First, the thistles are briefly featured in their kitchen, as she has been beaten down by her miscarriage, Mark's disdain, and her being trapped at Lumen. Even though Gemma is a broken thistle, she is still resilient, trying to reunite with her loved one. Mark and Gemma's song seems to be Billie Holiday's I'll Be Seeing You, playing a couple times in this episode, while showing up on Mark's first date when he brings up Gemma.
Thank you.
And again when he's taping her picture back together.
Be seeing you.
Weirdly, the outfits and hairstyles Gemma sports while going into all of these different testing rooms mirrors those of the other Egan women CEOs and Imogen. In the Allentown Christmas room, theoretically being the first room that was created for Gemma because of Mark's freshman fluke, various items printed by O&D can be seen scattered all over the floor while we see her struggling to write with her left hand, her non-dominant hand, as she's clearly writing with her right hand earlier in the episode. All of these rooms are unfavorable things, as thank you notes in general are something briefly mentioned Gemma does not like doing.
I'll write you a thank you note.
Hate writing thank you notes.
This specifically was added by creator Dan Erickson, as it's a personal bugaboo of his own.
What I hate is having to write thank you notes, and that is a very specific and petty gripe that I have, that I've had since childhood. I feel like I was sort of working through that via the show.
In the brief Mark and Gemma Christmas flashback, the quilt on their love seat is the same one that Mark used earlier when trying to burn the message into his retinas. Gemma's record player is weirdly all in German, and that's because it's from the Braun line, specifically developed by German industrial designer Dieter Rams, another nod to newly introduced Dieter Egan. But this all was an original inspiration for Apple's minimalistic design to its products like the original iPod. And we don't discover what Cold Harbor is until the finale episode. However, if you look really closely at the brand of baby bed that Mark purchases, it basically spoils it, and its name is essentially Cold Harbor.
Shut up!
Episode 8 has Cobell returning to her hometown of Salt's Neck, first appearing on the roadside sign in episode 3. In reality, though, these coastal and town shots are actually Trinity Bay North on the Bonavista Peninsula in Newfoundland. Cobell drives a white VW Rabbit, another Alice in Wonderland Follow the White Rabbit reference. Episode 8's title is Sweet Vitriol, meaning sweet oil vitriol or diethyl ether, another sly nod to our boy Dieter, as diethyl ether is a compound made by distilling ethanol and sulfuric acid, as we discovered this abandoned Salt's Neck was where one of Lumen's first ether mills was located. Cobell mentions that Sissy lives out on an area called the Nine, named after the 9 Lumen core principles. Theoretically, this was a Lumen housing for Salt's Neck, as it mirrors the same blue and white of Mark's Bard Creek Lumen housing. Sissy's quarterly Striver plaque gives us a lot of information on her, learning that her first name is actually Celestine, meaning of the sky or heavenly, winning this award for the year of vision. She's a hard worker and sees the clear vision or ambition of Kier's teachings. However, Sissy is Latin for blind or the blind one, as she's a silly little goose and is blindly following the teachings of Kier and Lumen. Sissy's white cult-like outfit mirrors that of Cobell's when she's preparing to give praise to Kier. Amongst Sissy's shrine, various Lumen-centric items can be seen that mirror the same objects in Cobell's own shrine in her home. But the one that stands out to me is the Lumen work-life balance flyer being a seesaw, something that's mentioned all the way back in the very first episode of Severance.
Let's chat about something I bet you have heard of, the work-life balance. To start, imagine yourself as a seesaw. Ow!
In her mother's room is the same Myrtle Egan School for Girls photo of young Cobell, as we learn her school's mascot were the Fighting Kids, which is the name used for baby goats. It all ties back to the goats. Episode 9 starts with Jaime and Helena's morning routine, with her plate featuring a person pulled in two different directions, our innie and outie, as it appears that this is taking inspiration from older Welsh designs. Helena splits the egg once, much like the Severance procedure, later separating it into 6 different pieces, symbolizing Gemma's multiple innies on the testing floor. As the first time we see her, she's told that she has to go into 6 different doors on that day.
How many rooms today? 6.
Jaime wishes Helena ate her eggs raw, a nod to Kier Egan's favorite breakfast all the way back in season 1.
You know he used to drink 3 raw eggs and milk each morning?
I've heard.
His favorite breakfast.
This tells me Helena may not entirely be aligned with the other Egans and carrying on the lineage, as she only eats the outside of the egg, with her being the outie in this situation. Miss Wong is sent off to the Gunnell Egan Empathy Center with Gunnell meaning battle maid, and we learn that her first name is Eustace, meaning fruitful person, and I really hope that this does not tie in with James' creepy siring others in the dark. Milchick has really lost his managerial edge compared to Cobell solely from this little door interaction.
Leave it open.
Open or closed?
Both.
I'll just...
Weirdly, Mark's conversation to disarm Milchick over the phone is almost verbatim or in the same realm as the one that he gives to Cobell about work just being work.
I mean, work is just work, right?
Work's just work, right?
As love may in fact transcend Severance, because notes of the Bert and Irving love theme kind of bleed through the background score.
I want to remember it.
I come here sometimes.
Irving wants to be with Bert, mirroring their interactions from season 1, this time with Irving attempting to make the first move. Having never been loved, unsure if he was actually ready, now he is. He wants Bert's love.
I'm truly sorry. I'm just not ready. I want to have it. Nothing. I'm ready.
It's all a what-if scenario as Bert sends Irving off the same way that he did with his innie.
Bon voyage. Buddy.
Good job, buddy. Bon voyage.
The cartoon playing on Dylan's television is the first colored cartoon television series, 1957's Colonel Bleep, specifically Season 1, Episode 25, titled The Killer Whale. The engagement ring Dylan makes for Gretchen are from pieces of his old finger trap prizes that he's won, meaning he's willing to sacrifice the best thing he has on the severed floor for this thing called love. The title of Episode 9 is The After Hours, referencing Season 1, Episode 35 of The Twilight Zone, as this is further referenced as the code phrases between Cobell and the gate guard, pulling directly from that episode.
Miss Marshall White, 9th floor. Specialties Department. I'm looking for a gold thimble.
Miss Marshall White on the 9th floor. Specialties Department, looking for a gold thimble.
In this specific episode, it features a mannequin coming to life, mirroring that of Innie Mark coming to life at the birthing cabin, an unknown foreign place to him. As this episode, Season 2, Episode 9, comes to a close with the same words that Season 1, Episode 9 ended with.
She's alive!
She's alive.
Howdy Mark referring to his innie lover as Helene is like when Rickon referred to Cobell as Cobelvig, showing how this person really doesn't care about the other persona, which is like when Helena was talking with Mark in the Chinese restaurant, mistaking his late wife's name as Hannah. The exalted victory of Cold Harbor and many of the other Keir paintings are taking ironic inspiration from Christian nationalist John McNulty's own political and religious paintings, adopting a similar design and layout, imparting Keir's religion on everyone pictured socially and politically. The Keir animatronic was something mentioned by Gwen back in episode 1.
Do the Eakins move?
No.
Huh. Probably because it's an older branch. Ours were animatronic. They even did this little choreographed dance.
So yours just stand there?
As behind the scenes, it was voiced by Mark Geller, whom Keir Egan is modeled after, making me theorize that he's going to eventually show up in one of these future seasons in live action, while Ben Stiller was the one behind the scenes controlling the animatronic, learning via the official Severance podcast that he's been obsessed with animatronics since childhood. C&M, or Choreography and Merriment Department, is the latest Severance department to be introduced, but we actually kind of caught a glimpse of them back during the Waffle Party in Season 1. In the credits, the leader of C&M is named Bukeo, meaning brings joy or adds joy, as the band plays under green and blue lights, referencing how the very first Severance chip prototype looked.
The prototype. It had the blue and green lights back then.
The milkchick running out of the room is meme gold, and behind the scenes it was entirely unintentional. They filmed a handful of takes, and in this one, Tramell Tillman just took off running. The camera operator wasn't ready, hence why the weird framing, but it was the take that they fused in their final cut. More behind-the-scenes looks is when Mark and Drummond are fighting. Adam Scott actually received a concussion when being thrown against the wall. His arm was supposed to come up and cushion the impact, but it was caught in like an awkward position and he couldn't block it in time. Twin Peaks and various other shows have been used as inspiration throughout Severance, as Cobell's spotlight face from the new Season 2 intro is a nod to Twin Peaks, specifically Season 3, Episode 2. Meet Me at the Equator is another nod to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, whereas I mentioned earlier that movie had the phrase, Meet Me in Montauk. Also, in the context of the severed floor, the exit stairwell is essentially the equator, the barrier or midpoint between the world of the innie and the world of the outies. The Cold Harbor room in Final Test feels like it's taking inspiration from the ending of 2001: A Space Odyssey. In that Stanley Kubrick film, the ending finds our main character in a weird, sanitized white room with some furniture. Later in a 1980s Japanese interview, Kubrick sheds some light on the interpretation of the ending, explaining it as a human zoo where David is observed with no sense of time, oddly similar to how Gemma is basically in the same situation, tested in various rooms and observed from outside parties. Kubrick continues saying that David is transformed into some sort of super being and sent back to Earth, suggesting him finding the Jupiter monolith allowed David to move on to the next step of human evolution, similar to how if this Severance chip barriers hold for Gemma in the eyes of Lumen and Keir, she has evolved into a new type of human, one free of the pain of trauma and woe. The ending hallway scene is brilliant, with Britt Lower confirming that yes, this is in fact Helly R, so any theories you have can just be thrown away, as this scene mirrors the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, with Mark traveling down to the underworld or the testing floor to rescue his wife Gemma, only to turn around at the very end, losing her theoretically forever. Mark and Helly run off together in love, mirroring that of Keir and Imogen, finding love in the spirit of industry, as Mel Torme's The Windmills of Our Mind plays. Weirdly, the inspiration for this song comes from Marilyn Bergman, the original lyricist for this song, from her own childhood, stating that when I was 7, I had my tonsils out, and as they gave me the ether, I remember this circular descent into a sleep state, all tying back to ether and Lumen's own Severance beginnings. And that is all of the Easter eggs, references, and small little tiny things you might have missed in Severance Season 2. Truly one of my favorite shows right now of 2025. It's way up there, and it was fun to just go back and rewatch some of these scenes with kind of a different context. Feel free to drop a like and subscribe, and drop in the comments any small little tiny details that you might have picked up, because Severance is dense. There's a lot. I cannot wait for Severance Season 3. Anyway, next up, I'm going to be doing one of these Easter egg video treatments for Scary Movie 2, so stay tuned for that. And if there's any other movies or shows you'd like me to break down just like this, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. Until Severance Season 3, a big bye-bye from any Jared B.